Howdy, everybody. I've got a quick 2.5 hour long presentation here for you to wrap it up. So hopefully y'all are ready for this. So user-centered observability, load testing, real user monitoring, and synthetics. So we're going to be talking about here. My name's Elliot Kirk. I'm a senior software engineer here at Grafana, coming up on about 2 years of being here now, which is cool. Great place to work. And before we get started, fun fact about me, I like to do this fun sport called highlining. It's a lot of fun. I have a lot of interesting stories about it. So if you want to hear anything, come talk to me afterwards. And what are we going to talk about here? So user experience is critical. We're going to be going over why the user experience is critical, what that means for us, and why it's so important. We're going to be talking about some solutions that Grafana has in order to monitor the user experience and make sure everything is running all smoothly. I'll go ahead and do some live demos of them and pray they don't break. And then, depending on how much time we have left, we'll do some Q&A, or I'll let y'all go to happy hour. So starting with something that is pretty uncontroversial, the end user experience is critical. In the end, customer experience really is everything. I'll have some examples in a bit here, but as you all would know, bad user experience is going to stop you from using something, or cost you some revenue, or spend developer time that's going to be needed to fix things. People are going to file support tickets, complain on Twitter, whatever. Causes problems that flows into engineering, and that adds up to revenue, loss, firefighting, lost time, etc. It's annoying. So we want to make sure that the user experience is solid. And another thing, I don't know about y'all, but humans are impatient. I definitely know that I am. In less than 1 second, far less than 1 second, customers start to get annoyed. And at Amazon, 17 years ago, they did a study that said that 100 milliseconds of latency injected into their web store cost them 1% of sales. And with a company like Amazon, that obviously adds up to a significant amount of sales. And similarly, Google did something like this, where they caused 20% slower, or a half-second slower page generation for their search results, and it cost them 20% of their traffic, which is also massive. So we're quite impatient, and these kinds of examples show just how impatient we are, and really feeds into the fact that we need to understand what is going on with the user experience and make sure everything is running smoothly. So the performance golden rule. Steve Souders famously said that 80 to 90% of the user response time is spent on the front end, so let's start there. And we agree here. We got solutions like real user monitoring and synthetics that try and next slide, that try and minimize that front-end time. But when you're working with something like K6 performance testing, we see the flip, where once the back-end becomes saturated, it makes sense that that is the bottleneck of our response times. And without a back-end, there's no front-end to deliver. So in the end, many variables impact end-user experience, and it's important to handle them across the entire stack. And that is pretty inopportune timing. It looks like I'm getting paged by support here. There's some kind of bad release going on, something to do with our... Well, I'm just going to let them know that I'm a little busy right now, but it does seem pretty perfect because I have some demos coming up that will help us to, potentially resolve these types of issues, getting paged on stage and whatnot. And I guess what a better way to segue than where do I start? We have a lot of solutions. There's a lot of aspects to this problem, and it can definitely get overwhelming. So where do we begin? Well, it makes a lot of sense to pick the low-hanging fruit that is real user monitoring, or RUM, because I'm probably going to be saying that a couple of times. So why should we start here? Well, at Grafana, we've built a solution that's super low overhead to set up. It's just a JavaScript snippet that you copy and paste into your application, and you're good to go. Some of you may have heard of it. It's called Faro. It's an open source JavaScript agent, and I'll give you some more details in a minute here. But how does it work? Well, that snippet that you embed into your application, it automatically instruments your front-end app and will start to collect, important data, web performance indicators, automatically collecting your front-end errors, possibly configuring front-end to back-end tracing if you'd like, sessions, tracking user behavior, all of this great stuff right out of the box. It's awesome. We're very proud of it. Synthetics. So synthetic monitoring, another solution that we offer here. Why do we need this if we already have real user monitoring? Well, real users are great. We love you all, but they're not always completing all of your workflows, right? And real user monitoring isn't proactive. It's a reactive solution. So we need synthetics in order to make sure that we have all of these workflows covered. And I know what you might be thinking. My application has a ton of workflows. This sounds like a nightmare to get all of this set up. The good approach for synthetic monitoring is to focus just on the critical workflows. So think integration tests in production. Things like updating your credit card information, changing your password, things that users don't do every day, but if they weren't to do them, there'd be a problem. You'd get paged. Someone would just stop using your product. So synthetic monitoring, it just helps to detect slippage or faults, failure on your critical workflows. And last but not least, we've got performance testing. And why would I need this as an engineer? We already have RUM and we have synthetics, so what's this for? Well, it can be disruptive to get paged sometimes. Wouldn't know anything about that. But performance testing, it keeps you proactive. It happens in pre-production. And with our modern systems, we want to embrace failure. We want to fail early and often and catch these things before they see the light of day. And they're really simple. It's just like maintaining a delivery pipeline with your other tests. Devs will write unit tests for production, and it fits right into your workflows. I'll show exactly how you do it in a minute here. And you know what all this reminds me of, all these three things together? Swiss cheese. So bear with me here. The Swiss cheese model. As you add more layers, in our case, different ways to understand the user experience, fewer issues get through because the holes just don't line up. So logically, it's best to start in prod. RUM, real user monitoring, is the easiest to set up. And then next, I would create some synthetic monitoring checks to check on those critical workflows. And finally, I would do some performance testing to shift from reactive to proactive. And would you believe it? Grafana has solutions for all of these things. We've got Grafana Cloud Frontend Observability, Grafana Synthetics, and Grafana Cloud K6. And that seems like a good segue to do a demo for y'all. Nice. Okay, so just a little context to this demo. I think Merle mentioned this telescope store that Grafana helped to maintain. And, observability and all, it sells telescopes. So naturally, we're going to want to make this observable, more observable than it already is, haha. And so we have instrumented this with Faro, and we have some synthetic monitoring checks and performance testing running on this. Just wanted to give you all some context for what we're about to look at here. Cool. So what we're looking at here is Grafana Cloud Frontend Observability. And I'm just going to click into this app here to get us into this overview page. So what we're looking at here is all of the telemetry data that is generated or sent to our endpoints from the Faro Web SDK that I was just mentioning, the JavaScript agent. I guess it's been sitting open for a second. I just refreshed that. But looking from top to bottom here, we get some key performance indicators about our application. Things like page loads and error counts, as well as something called our Web Vitals, which is a collection of metrics that Google has deemed important to web application stability and usability. Things like time to first byte, first contentful paint, how long it takes for the application to load initially, cumulative layout shift, how much jumping around happens after the first load. And then we have this visualization below, which shows all of our errors and page loads together, and we're definitely definitely doing pretty poorly in the errors department. I have a feeling that has something to do with the incident that I just got paged for. So we'll take a look at that in a second. We also have this page performance table here that shows us automatically collected routes. So within your application, you have your routes, and they oftentimes will have some kind of ID associated with them. Our receiver automatically aggregates those down into groups, into their page IDs, and you're able to see how each individual page is performing. And this one's definitely experiencing a lot of errors, and this new order not visible enough, I have not seen this before, so I'm going to want to keep an eye on that as we move through the rest of this demo here. So let's look at some errors now, because that's kind of the focus. This is another visualization, breaks it down by the count of errors, by the page ID they're associated with, as well as the browser. And if I wanted to, I could click into one of these here and take a look at what's going on. But before I do that, let's just keep diving into the rest of this investigation. So we can look at the user sessions also generated by the Web SDK. A user session is defined by like a period of activity for somebody on the web page. After like 15 minutes of inactivity, we generate a new session. But this allows us to take a look and see how a user moves through the application. So if I can click into one of these guys, we get a similar view that we've seen on other pages, some KPIs, the web vitals again, but specific to this session, the total number of errors generated, as well as the user journey. So what this is it's essentially all of the telemetry data that gets collected for this particular session. And if we looked at one, we could just see some metadata associated with it. Or if we looked at an error, you can see the error message here, and we can view it in our error visualization. We can see traces that get generated and sent to the endpoint. But if we head to the end of this user journey here, I want to try and find that error. And there it is again, that order not visible enough. This thing keeps showing up, and it seems relatively new. So let's take this into error awareness here. And here we can see some more details, as well as the stack trace of the error. These stack traces are about to get much better as we're in the middle of fuzzing out on screen. Cool. We're in the middle of finalizing some source map enhancement stuff that'll help to make these stack traces more usable to end users. I'm going to see if I can fix this again. Okay. Well, now that we see all this stuff, let's head back into error awareness here, where it's an aggregation of all of the errors that we see across our application. I'm just going to add this to our watch list, and hopefully that'll help us keep an eye on things as this investigation progresses. Now, how did we get this all set up? Is it really as easy as I was saying it was? Well, if we head into this tab here, the Web SDK configuration, depending on how you want to use the Web SDK, package manager or CDN, really all you have to do is come in here and copy and paste this snippet into the root of your web application, and all this stuff comes out of the box for free. It's really great. So that's front-end observability, and that's kind of the first step in this chain here. Let's switch it over to synthetic monitoring. Cool. So synthetic monitoring, this is just kind of the dashboard looking at one of the checks that we have configured. And how did we configure this synthetic monitoring check? Well, let's take a look in here. And cool, it looks fine up there. So how do we configure one of these things? Well, we have some general stuff, like a name, whether it's enabled. But then we have all these probe options. And basically what's happening is we are picking a location from where these HTTP checks are going to be coming from. It helps us determine like the availability and reachability of our specific endpoint from various places around the world. We can configure the frequency, the timeout, etc. And then we can configure the request themselves. And synthetic monitoring has a new feature called multi-HTTP checks, which essentially allows us to create chains of HTTP checks and feed the results of one into the next. So for example, we're calling a products API here, and we are passing some query parameters, and then we're assigning some of the results of this API call into a variable that we can use in a subsequent step. So we have this product ID variable, and then we can pass it down along here to our recommendations API, which generates recommendations for other items based on a previous item. And we can see we have this product ID available, and we use that as a query parameter for this next check. And then we just assert that the response exists. It's a very simple check. Just want to make sure this API works. And if we wanted to, we could configure some alerting. Don't have that set up right now, but it's a nice way to make sure that all of these checks are still happening and things are running in the background. So what does this look like when we run a check here? Well, we can take a look at this dashboard. And this gives us an overview of how this check has been running. It's been running, every 60 seconds for a while now, so we can take a look at whatever period we need, but this is just the last hour. We can see how the assertion is doing over time. We can see that, Paris wasn't doing so hot there. And it just gives us an easy way to check and see how these different probes are behaving over time. Heading down a bit more, we can take a look at the requests by the API themselves. So clicking into the products API here, we can see no error rates on this one, which is great. And I guess a quick spike of errors on the recommendations API, which is another thing that could explain the page that I was just getting. And if I wanted to, I could filter down to just errors only and investigate some of the error logs that are generated by these checks. So that's synthetic monitoring. Pretty easy to configure, a lot of stuff just available for you once you get a check running, and really helpful to make sure that all of your critical workflows are happening as they should. So the last step in the chain is performance testing. And for that, we're going to take a look at Grafana Cloud K6. I have a few runs that I've already done here, but I'm going to click into this guy. And before I do this, I want to show you how you can run it from your existing developer tools. So over here, I've got my VS Code, and this is the K6 test that I'm running in Grafana Cloud. It's pretty straightforward. It's a browser test, and we're essentially just looking for a product card on the page, adding 3 of them to the cart, and then doing an assertion there at the end. And to run it, all I have to do is this K6 Cloud and then the name of the test itself. And I'm going to do that, but we're not going to wait for the test to run. Just wanted to show you it runs. And let's click into one of these previous runs that I already did. Awesome. So this is what you get after running a test and visualizing it in Grafana Cloud. You can see the number of requests that were made, how many failures, pretty significant amount of failures based on the total requests, requests per second, etc. And that's just on the HTTP side of things. Because we are also running a browser test, we can see all of the browser metrics associated with that test. And this is a pretty similar visualization to what you saw in front-end observability. We have those same web vitals that we talked about. But it seems like in this test, they were not doing as well as they were in our previous example. So that's something to note. But heading back to the HTTP side of things, I mean, if we look at this chart here, it's a little concerning. I mean, this request rate went up really quickly and then dropped as the number of virtual users kind of plateaued. And then the response time just started to climb, and then it plateaued until it dropped off. And this failure rate and request rate were just identical till the end of the test. So don't want to jump to conclusions quite yet, but it seems like something hit the server really, really hard, and we weren't able to load balance for this. And so maybe some of these requests were getting dropped. Additionally, we get some performance insights based on our test. We failed 2 of these, and so we can get some recommendations for why these are not performing as well as they could, some strategies to fix them. Nice. It's great when the laptop fails and not the demo itself, right? But yeah, K6 provides us with some automatic insights that help us to determine how we can keep things moving smoothly and prevent any of these issues from happening in the future. So that's cool. There's a lot more, but it was just showing us the 2 that were failed, but it looks like we're generally doing pretty good. So down here we can get some more details on the tests themselves. There are 3.3K failures for this recommendations API. And just like we were talking about up top, it seems like towards the tail end of this test, things just started failing. And I have a feeling that it has to do that we need to upsize the nodes working on this, because obviously we're getting hit too hard and we're not able to deliver. So that's K6. There's some more stuff in here. We generate traces. We can visualize more browser metrics as well as all of our logs. But I think y'all get the picture. And I think we can switch back to the slides now. So just to summarize here, we saw Grafana Frontend Observability in action, helped us to catch some errors and visualize how users are using our applications. We had Grafana Synthetics to give us signals if we had something failing, specifically on our critical workflows. And then we also had Grafana Cloud K6 to let us run some performance tests to see exactly what was going on and help us to determine that there might be an issue with load balancing and with the number of concurrent requests getting too high. And that's going to help us give us a lot of confidence before we can release, especially once we get those issues fixed. So with that, I think that's time for us. Appreciate y'all for listening. Thanks.